Hello and welcome to WION World as One. I start this broadcast with a question. Are you thinking of buying an electric vehicle? They're all the rage now, after all. You would assume they're good for the environment, right? Stay with us on WION's Climate Tracker today. With me, Priyanka Sharma, we'll get you the complete story. Aiming for a sustainable, emission-free future, the world is rapidly moving towards clean energy. Electric vehicles are the new thing. They do not run on hydrocarbons like your normal diesel or petrol-powered engines. Therefore, they reduce the stress on the planet. These EVs run on batteries essentially, supposedly better for the environment, right? In reality, not so much. Batteries are undoubtedly a key to energy transition. But to make those, you need metals like cobalt and manganese. It's important to note that these metals are not readily available. Mining firms have been scouring the planet for several years to look for reserves. And their search ended at an unexpected place: the ocean beds. They are rich, unexplored territory for the metal mining sector. Now, as investors and companies move towards quote-unquote exploiting the mineral resources, climate activists have raised an alarm. They say that deep-sea bed mining can irreversibly impact the marine ecosystem. Now first, let's understand how such elements are sourced. When you think of mining, the first image that comes to mind is digging caves and tunnels, possibly. But mining the ocean floor doesn't quite work that way. These rocks are present on the top of the ocean floor, not under it. They are present some 4 to 6 kilometers below the surface, often partly or completely buried. These tennis ball-sized compounds are called nodules. They are formed after hundreds and thousands of years of sedimentation. The elements in these nodules are present in their oxide forms, for example, manganese oxide or iron oxide. And these nodules are an essential part of a centuries-old ecosystem. Many of the undiscovered marine species depend on them, and when companies scrap the ocean floor, they stir up a plume of sand and sediment, naturally disturbing the fragile ecosystem. Moreover, the mining dredge also leads to a lot of noise pollution, creating an additional set of troubles for the peaceful marine life. The noise will not impact just the nearby organisms, but as per a report published in the journal earlier this year, underwater life hundreds of kilometers away will also be impacted. The noise will likely act as a disturbance for communication between species like the whales. The deep ocean is beyond the jurisdiction of individual countries. After all, it is governed by an intergovernmental body called the International Seabed Authority. Some reports say that the ISA has already approved 28 mining contracts that will cover an area of more than 1 million square kilometers, while it still works out the standards and regulations for operations. Now that is something to think about. Staying now with the transition to green energy, a new study carried out by the Oxford University says that switching from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources can help save the world as much as $12 trillion by mid-century. The report comes in contradiction to the common belief that moves quickly towards cleaner energy sources was expensive. Researchers say keeping in mind the high energy prices and consistently cheapening renewable sources, it makes much more sense to practically move in direction of a transition. The study looks at historic price data of renewable energy sources as well as fossil fuels. While predicting their costs in the future, it highlights the price of fossil fuels in the use for nearly 100 years. And that has not changed much in the last 2 decades. But the price of generating wind, solar or water energy has fallen rapidly in recent years. Researchers say that these renewables are new when compared to the traditional carbon-emitting sources, and they are getting cheaper every year. The report further adds the prices will continue to fall in the future as investment and the scale of such energy generation projects continues to grow. Also taking into account the rapid technological advancements at present, wind and solar sources are the cheapest option for new power projects, but work still needs to be done on storing this energy, as well as balancing the output when the weather conditions are not favourable. When would the world's bleaching coral reefs pass the point of no return? When would warming temperatures cause the Greenland ice sheets to collapse and trigger severe sea level rise? Leading scientists are now claiming that the world's chances of avoiding these very scenarios are diminishing, and rapidly so, as we enter what is now being called uncharted territory of destruction. According to the United in Science report, despite intensifying climate-related warnings that have been witnessed in recent years, governments and businesses have not been changing fast enough to cut down on their greenhouse gas emissions. The consequences of not cutting down on these emissions can already be seen across the globe. The recent flooding in Pakistan is another wake-up call. The floods had covered a third of the country in water. While in China, prolonged droughts resulted in the country's water bodies to deplete at worrisome levels. The consequences of climate change just do not end here. In several European countries, extreme heat waves are experienced, with many regions recording their hottest days in recent history.
This year's United in Science report shows climate impacts heading into uncharted territories of destruction. Yet, each year, we double down on this fossil fuel addiction even as the symptoms get rapidly worse, even as we know the cure. Our leaders pledged in the Paris Agreement to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees and build climate resilience. This year's United in Science report shows that we are way off track.
Back in 2015, almost all nations signed the Paris Accord. The key climate agreement aims to limit the global temperature increase in the century to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, while pursuing the means to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees. Recent reports, however, do not have an optimistic outlook. For example, a report carried out by the UN and partner agencies says that there is a 48% chance that the landmark of 1.5 degrees rise in global temperatures will be hit in the next 5 years.
The report is a shameful reminder that resilience building is the neglected half of the climate equation. It is a scandal that developed countries have failed to take adaptation seriously and shrugged off their commitments to help the developing world.
Moreover, if countries do not show any urgency to cut down on their greenhouse gas emissions, we are in danger of provoking tipping points in the climate system. For more than a decade, climate researchers have been monitoring 16 tipping points. Now you must be wondering, what are these tipping points? Basically, climate tipping points are conditions beyond which changes in a part of the climate system will become irreversible. The global climate system could spiral towards a dangerous state which would be beyond repair. And now the research comes as an eye-opener for everyone. According to the study, at just 1.1 degrees Celsius, 5 of these tipping points are expected to be hampered. We can already see the early warning signs in Greenland, which is located between the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans, the largest island in the world, with the second largest ice sheet. This is crucial. But this ice sheet in Greenland is now melting away, eventually increasing the sea level. Moreover, earlier this year, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change stated that the risk of triggering climate tipping points will become much higher by around 2 degrees Celsius of warming, and if no changes are made to cut down the greenhouse gas emissions, then the world is on track to become warm by 2.6 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. Let's move on now. European countries are looking at alternative means of energy supply as global gas and oil prices continue to soar. And with the winter nearing, France has decided to go the archaic way. It is the latest country looking at reopening coal-fired power stations. Take a look.
Je suis resté sur la centrale, on repart sur le charbon, mais on sait que c'est pas bien, on sait qu'on pollue. Et quelque part, c'est un échec, parce que devoir redémarrer la centrale, c'est que l'État en fait ne peut pas faire autrement. Donc par rapport à l'écologie, enfin à notre planète, pour les enfants et tout, c'est un constat d'échec.
Citing the war in Ukraine, officials now say that they are considering reopening the station at the Saint-Avold in eastern France this winter. The power station was closed on the 31st of March this year as part of President Emmanuel Macron's pledge to shut all coal stations. The company will now have to rehire the staff that it previously had laid off on grounds of redundancy, along with the challenge of sourcing raw material in an already aggressive market.
Et donc pour ça, il nous fallait 500 à 600 000 tonnes de charbon, les commander, les faire arriver par le port jusqu'à la centrale. C'est 4 à 5 mois de délai d'approvisionnement. Sur le site, on a déjà 210 000 tonnes de charbon qui ont été approvisionnées. Le reste est en cours d'acheminement et donc on aura assez de charbon pour pouvoir faire cette saison de production dans un contexte où les prix explosent, où la logistique est de plus en plus compliquée et donc c'est un vrai défi. Et c'est un peu la guerre des barges et la guerre du charbon pour réussir à s'approvisionner en quantité l'hiver prochain.
A point to be noted here is that France was never too dependent on coal plants. Until early this year, it had just one such plant operating in the western part of the country. Most of France's electricity production comes from nuclear power. In 2020, nuclear energy accounted for 67% of the total supply, while coal stood for 0.3%. Even with that minute figure, going back to polluting hydrocarbons has raised an alarm. Activists say this move will add to the already worsening climate crisis and might possibly derail the EU off its net zero target. Let me ask you a question. What can you visualize when I say the word playground? You must have seen children playing on rides, running behind each other and whatnot. But in your visualization, did you see if the playground was made out of asphalt? Recently, grounds are being made out of asphalt, forcing children to be more careful while they play. But an initiative in France is making sure that this material is no longer a cause of worry for children. Take a look at this next report.
Students in this French school will no longer have to play in asphalted grounds. Moving a step further from greening their schoolyards, this school will soon upgrade its playgrounds from the heat-prone cement tiles to ones surrounded by trees and shrubs.
Is it that, even in playgrounds where for decades we have been told the opposite, we cannot run, play or do sports on anything other than asphalt or 100% permeable surfaces? So we tried it last summer and it turns out that the experiment was extremely positive. We decided to continue our schoolyard plan by removing the asphalt and reinforcing this place of nature and living things.
This primary school is one of the 7 projects undertaken by the City Council of Lille. The playgrounds of these schools have already been completely de-waterproofed. What this means is the rainwater can seep into the ground and provide a cooling effect.
In June, when the heat wave started, we could immediately see the benefits. We had shade, children were in a courtyard where they could breathe, they could play. Something that was previously forbidden to them because when it was very hot, they were asked, you don't run. Here, they could continue to play despite the heat. We really felt that the heat was no longer rising in our playground. And even more so for the kindergartners, who had to take out water trays, for example, in case of high heat in previous school years.
The project is part of a European Life Artisan program, which aims to study nature-based solutions to climate change. What's more, co-designed with the staff and students, the new strategy aims to promote contact with nature and encourage all-round development. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Let's move on. Our cockatoos have personalities as flashy and dynamic as their crests. Popular as pets, these birds have won many hearts. But in Sydney, these crafty sulphur-crested cockatoos appear to have entered into a garbage war with humans. Take a look.
In the idyllic coastal town of Stanwell Park, south of Sydney, bustling cafes are serving lunch. But as weekend crowds queue for their coffees, a hungry horde of onlookers eagerly wait in the wings.
Oh, yeah, it's not too bad actually. As you can see, they keep us company. Yeah, but they seem to be pretty chill, you know. Just got to make sure that we don't leave like food scraps out and that. Like come and get the scraps as quickly as possible and get them up in the kitchen, you know. Otherwise, they sort of just come down and you know have a bit of a frenzy.
If you're the one who has to interrupt their meal, though, these Australian white cockatoos can get a bit testy.
Loud, very persistent, aggressive, definitely. I once tried to shoo one away in front of a supermarket and it was arcing up to me, just wings spread, you know, its little crest thing at the back, flaring up and, you know, coming at you. It's very gangstery, probably.
When waitstaff can clear up the crumbs, the birds have worked out how to get a second helping, by dumpster diving. Scientists say the ability to flip the lids has spread to onlookers, and as humans stepped up the defence of their refuse, new research suggests it sparked an interspecies innovation arms race.
When we first started looking at this behaviour, we were already amazed because actually the cockatoos learned how to open the bins. But then looking at how this progressed and the people then protecting the bins, and I was really astonished by how many different methods people have invented. It's really amazing. And then taking this one step further, so the cockatoos being able to solve some of the methods and then people escalating again. So I think really this sort of stepwise progression and reiteration that was the most interesting part for me.
This is to stop the cockies, so I put it under here. Just to stop the cockatoos from getting in the bin.
Otherwise yeah, and how hard? Why did you go to that? What were you doing before?
Just down here. They had that rock on there.
And they moved that somehow, did they?
Somehow they moved it. I don't know how. It must have taken 5 or 6 of them, but yeah, they definitely moved it. So I had to go to the hockey strap, which I reckon I'll work out eventually.
If you put bricks on the bin lid, then in some areas the cockatoos are able to push them off. But I don't think that was immediately. So I think in a lot of suburbs that still works perfectly fine. So of course there is still a lot of dynamic in this whole behavioral arms race because we don't really know how it will develop further.
The key question is though, who will win this race?
I think that's really hard. I think ultimately it will be the humans. It could be that it just goes up the arms race and then at some point there is one that gives up or can't do it anymore, or there's so many other factors that maybe it just goes extinct in some places but not in others, and I think this will be really interesting to look at.
Even if researchers are tipping the humans, locals aren't cocky enough to underestimate their feathered competitors.
They're getting more intelligent, they're evolving. Yeah, if you go back 5-10 years ago, they didn't know how to open bins, so they're figuring stuff out.
Before we end the show, we show you some concerning visuals. The consequences of climate change can be seen everywhere. The hills, the waters and the ice shelves. One of the many alpine glaciers is melting faster than predicted. Geologists have raised concerns that the rocky terrain emerging from under the glacier is a warning for all of us for the future. Take a look. And with that, it's a wrap on WION's Climate Tracker. Thanks for watching with me, Priyanka Sharma. Stay tuned to WION World is One. Global news continues on the other side.